Here? Right here? What about, say, over there?
You are stupid, so I'll make myself clear. You are stupid. Go away.
No? Right here? All right then. You're the grand champion. Whatever you say.
I tell you so you can tell everyone who kicked the crap out of you.
Oblivion's Iceberg is chaotic to be sure. The game has a lot of secrets and odd things, but usually it's pretty surface stuff. I just did a video explaining 50 of these secrets on our channel, and a lot of that stuff would probably go in an iceberg. And some of it has. So instead, for this iceberg, we try to find the deeper things hidden in the game with more depth to them. Or at the very least, at least a full explanation on them. That includes more lore and theories and even development stuff. But of course, also the basic things you'd expect. We'll probably be making another Oblivion Iceberg in the near future, so consider subbing so you don't miss that one. They aren't separate parts, this is a full iceberg from the tip to the bottom layer, but the next iceberg might focus more on the Shivering Isles stuff. Enjoy, guys. Maiq the Liar is a Khajiit wanderer with a reputation for dropping some, let's say, unfiltered opinions about the game. In Oblivion, his comments seem a lot more grounded compared to his appearance in Morrowind. Instead of telling weird half-truths or making bizarre jokes, this time around he mostly brushes off criticisms of the game, almost like he's calling out people for nitpicking too much. You'll first spot Maiq just outside of Anvil, but after that, he starts making a long trek between Anvil and Leowen. If you fast travel to the stables in either city, there's a decent chance you'll catch him right as he's heading out. He generally sticks to the main roads, like the Gold Road, Red Ring, and Green Road, but he can actually ignore the game's invisible map boundaries. At noon, no matter where he is, Maiq takes a break from running just to look for calipers, for about 5 hours. Unless he's already hoarded 20 of them. Why calipers? Who knows? Maiq works in mysterious ways. He only talks about rumors, and every time you run into him, he'll drop a new one. And once the conversation ends, he immediately sprints off. Usually way faster than you can chase him, since both his speed and athletics are maxed out at 100.
Werewolves? Where? Wolves? Men that are wolves? Many wolves. Everywhere. Many men. That is enough for Maiq.
This is a reference to there being no werewolves in Oblivion and people wishing there was.
I have seen dragons. Perhaps you will see a dragon. I won't say where I saw one. Perhaps I did not.
A nod to Skyrim, of course.
I don't know why one would want to destroy a building. It takes time to make it. Much time.
This one is about destructible environments and Oblivion not having any. Pay attention to his subtitles as they explain more about him, and maybe there's some stuff you'll notice. You'll also find him in Skyrim and The Elder Scrolls Online doing the same things he does here in Oblivion. He's just a running gag. One of the weirder mysteries in The Elder Scrolls is how Maiq the Liar keeps popping up in every game without ever aging or acknowledging that he's done it all before. And there are literally hordes of theories on this and probably a bajillion videos on YouTube trying to explain it. The most popular idea is that Maiq isn't just one Khajiit. He's a whole line of Khajiit. The theory goes that every time Maiq dies, another one takes up the name and role, almost like a title being passed down. It would explain why he always looks about the same age and why his personality, while slightly different in each game, stays pretty consistent. Then there's the more mystical take. Some believe Maiq is actually a Daedric being or some kind of divine trickster spirit. This would explain how he seems to exist outside of time and space, always aware of the world around him and the people playing the game. He's constantly breaking the fourth wall, he talks about game mechanics, rumors from development, and fan complaints like he's in on the joke. Lastly, some players think he's a remnant of the Dragon Break, a time-bending event in the Elder Scrolls lore where cause and effect go completely out the window. If time was shattered during a Dragon Break, it's possible that different versions of Maiq from multiple timelines all ended up existing at once across Tamriel. I'm curious as to what your guys' personal theories are on Maiq. The Adoring Fan is one of the game's most infamous NPCs, and honestly, he's become a bit of a meme legend in the Elder Scrolls culture.
By Azura, by Azura, by Azura! It's the grand champion! I can't believe it's you standing here next to me.
He shows up after you become the grand champion of the arena in the Imperial City. Once you earn that title, he just appears, completely uninvited, and starts following you around everywhere. And he's not subtle about it either. He has bright yellow hair, He does over-the-top praise and that iconic high-pitched voice that sounds like he's perpetually amazed just to be near you. What makes him Iceberg worthy is how weirdly memorable he is for such a minor character. He doesn't serve any real gameplay function, he doesn't even fight, and he just gets in the way. But that's why people love him, or at least love to hate him. He's pure comic relief in a world that's otherwise full of dark quests and serious lore. He breaks the tension intentionally or not. For Oblivion players, the adoring fan became the perfect stress test dummy. People would push him off cliffs, or trap him in dungeons, or even mod him into Skyrim just to keep the chaos going. There's even a whole subculture of videos and memes where players find creative ways to deal with him. He also made a reappearance in Starfield of all places, which puts more credit to the whole Fallout, Elder Scrolls, and Starfield all existing in the same universe theory. We don't know much about him beyond our first-hand experience. There's no background lore or any pieces of evidence to really make any substantive theories. I don't even know if I really need to explain the adoring fan, honestly. He might just be the most well-known character in all of the Elder Scrolls.
You see Khajiit always running to the city? You see Rajirad and his brothers. We bring the Black Horse Courier to the good citizens, yes?
The Black Horse Courier is a newspaper that shows up all over Cyrodiil, and while it may seem like just a bit of, I don't know, like background immersion fluff, it actually does play a unique role in the world building. It goes deeper than most people realize. It's run by 3 Khajiit brothers who operate out of the market district in the Imperial City. These guys pump out newspapers anytime something major happens, especially if you had something to do with it. Complete a major quest, maybe foil a cult, or just simply unleash some chaos, there's a fresh edition of the Black Horse Courier waiting for you in the nearest city. The Courier isn't just a way to track your progress though. It's one of the few systems in the game that reacts dynamically to your actions. The articles are sometimes dramatized or slightly off from what actually happened, which is pretty cool too. Oblivion fake news type of shit. It's like you're watching how the public interprets your choices through the lens of in-game journalism. The Courier sort of exists in this weird space between immersive world building and subtle satire. The idea of a print newspaper in a fantasy world is already kind of unusual, but then it's run by a trio of hyper-efficient Khajiit who somehow know everything about your heroic deeds and write about it immediately. It's never really explained how they know so much or how they distribute the papers so quickly, and there's even a theory that the Black Horse Courier is secretly spying on you, or that they're tied to the Blades or the Empire in some type of way, subtly tracking your every move. Also, you might have noticed random people rushing around on black horses around the game. These are the actual couriers delivering the papers to the different cities, another cool little detail that gets lost on most people.
The Black Horse Courier is our Imperial News Service, chartered by the Elder Council.
Oh, look. An Imperial in the Imperial prison. I guess they don't play favorites, huh? Your own kinsmen think you're a piece of human.
Valen Dreth is one of those characters you only interact with for a couple minutes, but he sticks in your memory way longer than he probably should. He's the Dunmer locked up in the cell right across from yours at the very start of the game. The first voice you hear aside from the guards. From the moment you walk into that prison cell, Valen Dreth starts hurling insults your way. Doesn't matter who you are or what race you picked, he's going to trash talk you like it's his full-time job. He's cocky, he's smug, and he's completely full of himself, which makes it kind of satisfying when you learn he's been stuck in that cell for 11 years, and that he isn't going anywhere anytime soon. He actually shows up again later in the game if you join the Dark Brotherhood. One of your assassination contracts is to take him out, and it's really goddamn cathartic to take this guy out. I'm sure you'd agree. One popular idea is that Dreth has some kind of deeper connection to the Emperor's assassination. Some speculate that his cell placement wasn't random, that he may have been part of the plot or at least knew something about it at some point. I mean, he is the only other prisoner in that entire section, and the Blades just so happen to use your cell as an escape route? Kinda sus. Others think he might be related to the Thalmor or involved in shady dealings with the Mythic Dawn, especially given his clear hatred of the Empire and his weird confidence like he knows something the rest of us don't. But the coolest theory is that Valen has most likely met the Necrophilia. I know, I just blew your mind. He's been in prison for 11 years, confirmed by his own words. The Necrophilia was brought to Vvardenfell 6 years prior. He was a prisoner at the Imperial City, so probably he was also somewhere in that jail. They could have been in different sections though. It's just cool to know that this guy might have known the champion and the Necrophilia.
Hey, you hear that? The guards are coming. For you.
Ravani just wants to get along. No trouble. Anything you want. Ravani's know nothing, good for nothing. Ask anyone. Just don't hurt Ravani.
Skooma in Oblivion is more than just a random in-game drug. It's Tamriel's version of a highly addictive narcotic, made from refined moon sugar, and it's been a part of Elder Scroll lore for a long time. But in Oblivion, it starts to take on a slightly different tone. It's not just lore background anymore, and it starts to bleed into the actual gameplay and character interactions in some pretty strange ways. Mechanically, Skooma gives you a massive boost to speed and strength, but the trade-off is brutal. It tanks your agility and intelligence, so yeah, you can run and hit harder for a while, but you're basically turning yourself into a hyperactive maniac who can't aim or think. On top of that, it's technically illegal in most cities, and if you're caught with it, or try selling it, guards and shopkeepers won't be thrilled. In almost every corner of Cyrodiil, there's some sad or sketchy story involving skooma. You've got full-on skooma dens where people are zonked out and barely functional. There's the Bravil Skooma Den, one of the most infamous spots where everyone inside is basically written off by society. You even meet a guy who's trying to clean up his life and break his addiction, and it's one of those few side quests in the game that dives into how destructive skooma can be long term. And then there's the skooma dealers, who range from back alley peddlers to full-on smugglers. Some quests let you bust them, others let you join them, but basically this drug is everywhere behind the scenes and you don't even know it.
The Elder Council, sometimes called the Imperial Council, is the beating heart of the Empire's political machine, especially during the events of Oblivion. On the surface, they're just a group of fancy-pants nobles advising the Emperor. But if we take a closer look, we'll find out that this council is a lot more than just advisors. They're often the ones actually pulling the strings. Historically, the council was filled with the wealthiest and most influential figures in the Empire. It wasn't exactly a democratic setup. It's a one-house, unelected body where power is inherited or bought. Over time, especially under Emperor Uriel VI, the council's influence took a backseat as the Emperor began to rule more directly, but that didn't last forever. By the time Oblivion takes place, the council is basically in charge again. With Uriel's septum and his heirs assassinated at the start of the game, there's no clear ruler. That leaves High Chancellor Akato, the council's leader, in charge. And for a good 15 years before the crisis, he's already been handling most of the day-to-day operations behind the scenes. So when the septum line ends, he steps up as the de facto ruler. But the council wasn't exactly unified. Most of its members returned to their home provinces to manage local affairs, leaving just a core inner council still meeting regularly. This disjointed structure made it harder for the Empire to respond effectively to the Oblivion crisis. The Imperial Legion was spread thin and fully committed across Tamriel, and pulling them back would have triggered political chaos. So Cyrodiil was basically left to fend for itself during one of the worst disasters in its history. And as you saw, shit hit the fan. Eventually, the Elder Council recognizes Martin's septum as the last heir. But before his reign can even begin, Mehrunes Dagon crashes the coronation party by invading the Imperial City. Martin sacrifices himself to banish Dagon, ending the Oblivion crisis, but also wiping out the septum bloodline completely. After that, things fall apart. The provinces start talking about leaving the Empire, and even Akato isn't sure how long the Empire can hold together. Some counts support him, recognizing him as the only stable leadership left. Others, like the Count of Breville, are suspicious, thinking Akato might try to crown himself emperor. Meanwhile, there's a growing sentiment that the Elder Council has abandoned Cyrodiil altogether, focusing more on keeping the provinces in line than protecting the capital. Of course, this had to be on the list. The infamous DLC that basically became Oblivion's legacy. It wasn't just a cosmetic add-on, it was the add-on that kickstarted a massive conversation in gaming history. Nowadays, it's kind of a joke, but back in 2006, it was actually pretty controversial. The Horse Armor Pack was the very first piece of paid DLC released for Oblivion, and one of the earliest examples of microtransactions in a single-player RPG. For $2.50, you could deck out your horse in either the steel or elven armor. That's it. There were no new quests, no stat boosts, no special abilities, just some fancy horse drip. And people were not happy. To be fair, the armor does look cool, but for a lot of people at the time, this marked the beginning of what felt like a shift in game design, where extra content was no longer something you earned in-game, but something you had to pay for on top of the full price of the game. A lot of people saw this as a cash grab, especially since there were a lot of free mods out there doing way more for less. But despite the backlash, the Horse Armor DLC went on to become a piece of gaming history. It's still brought up today anytime someone complains about overpriced cosmetic content. Even Bethesda leaned into the joke later, referencing it in Skyrim, Fallout 4, and even bringing it back in the Creation Club. It's become a symbol for the thing nobody asked for, but also the thing everyone remembers. And of course, it's back again in Oblivion Remastered. But now we get to add to the iceberg, because the deluxe version of the remastered game comes with 2 more horse armor additions, but they do include some mini quests. Horse armor is back, and it'll never die.
Let me give you some advice, stranger. Leave, now. You ain't welcome here.
On the surface, Hactor seems like a rundown mining town, but of course it's not, and it's a group of cultists doing culty stuff. Did you really expect anything less from these people? The villagers of Hactor worship the Deep Ones, beings believed to dwell in the caverns beneath the town. Their devotion is chronicled in the Bible of the Deep Ones, which is a book written by Erlov Moslin, I think that's how you say the name, after allegedly meeting the chief of the Deep Ones and learning their language in runes. The text is penned in Daedric script and contains passages that, when translated, are nearly identical to this. A work associated with the infamous Necromancer. The Deep Ones themselves are never seen in-game, but their presence is felt. In the caverns, you can hear low, ominous growls like something ancient and malevolent lurking in the deep. The entire Hactor storyline is a clear nod to H.P. Lovecraft's The Shadow over Innsmouth, with the obvious similar themes of isolated communities, forbidden knowledge, and a worship of eldritch beings. This is all we know about the supposed Deep Ones for now. It is interesting to think that Slugman might have had some influence on the whole thing, and maybe they just found one of its books, or maybe he was messing with them at some point.
Outsiders came and burned our town years ago. Ruined us. But we'll get ours back one day soon.
Braville's Skooma Den is found in the northeast corner of the town. It's pretty well hidden and something you might never really stumble upon. It's a small 2-story apartment above Corandiel's house. You'll usually spot a few addicts hanging around, sipping from those glowing purple flasks, sometimes even outside on the balcony. That is your first clue as to something sketchy going on. Once you go inside, it's pretty clear what this place is about. Everyone in there is either drinking skooma or sleeping off the effects. Most of them carry a decent stash, like 5 to 15 bottles each. And they're not even bothered if you sneak a few off them. Just watch out for Roxanne though. She will report you if she catches you stealing. There's also a few chests inside, some that are locked, and that might even have more skooma tucked away. The whole place feels run down with a few beds scattered around. There's 3 upstairs and 1 down, and they're all free to use if you want to crash. None of the regulars do much beyond sleep, drink, and eat. And interestingly enough, the Count's son, Gellius Terentius, shows up every Sundays to join in. And he doesn't really hide the fact that he's the Count's son. I guess he just doesn't really care. You can also find a couple guys from the Imperial City that'll show up every now and then. This place is a cool little secret, but what's more important is all the skooma stories surrounding it. And we'll get to that deeper in the iceberg.
Do you happen to know what the fine is here in Cyrodiil for necrophilia?
Most towns in Cyrodiil have their oddballs. The eccentric mage, the paranoid beggar, the drunk noble. But in Skingrad, the local alchemist might just be a corpse enthusiast. The owner of all things alchemical seems normal enough at first. A Dunmer dressed in fine clothes, selling potions and alchemy gear. She has a shop, a schedule, a bed upstairs, and the perfect life to the unassuming adventurer that never took the time to truly get to know her. But then she asks you something.
By the way, do you happen to know what the fine is here in Cyrodiil for necrophilia? Just asking. Let's assume no. That's nothing compared to Morrowind. Thanks.
There's no follow-up and quest to pry into why she asked this question, and there's not so much as a consequence to her inquiry. She shrugs it off shortly after, but the damage is done at this point, and we've got to ask ourselves, why is she asking such a thing? If you brush it off as a one-time joke, Skingrad citizens will quickly correct you saying things like, there's just something wrong with her, or I've seen her hanging around the graveyard with a strange smile on her face, or she smells off. Again, no quest ever explains anything more on this. You can't catch her in the act for obvious reasons, and there's no skeletons in her closet, literally speaking anyway. Yet the implications are crystal clear. This chick's got a thing for the dead. What makes this especially weird is how normal she otherwise seems. Bethesda didn't make her a cackling necromancer or some blood-covered villain. She's polite and friendly, albeit maybe a little lonely, but that's exactly what makes it feel so off. I don't think this line was ever part of a broader cut quest or even dialogue that slipped past the censors, and I think it's more just fun dark humor. And if you enjoy playing Bethesda games, dark humor is what makes them all the more fun.
There are weapons in Oblivion forged by smiths, and then there are those forged by something else, burned into the world by pure Daedric fury. One such weapon is Hatred's Soul, a Daedric bow so powerful, so rare that most players miss it entirely on their first playthrough. You won't find it in a shop, a dungeon, or as a quest reward. It lies hidden inside a sunken tower in the Deadlands, beneath the Coral Oblivion Gate. Alongside it is its brutal twin, Hatred's Heart, which is a mace of equal menace. The tower itself isn't marked as there's no door and no marker. Instead, the entrance lies buried underneath the lava plains, at the far edge of the map in nearly an invisible tunnel called the Fume Vaults. You'll need to cross broken bridges, leap over molten rivers, and walk across the collapsed remains of Daedric gates, just to reach the island that hides the entrance. It's quite the journey to Mordor at this point. But if you find it, you'll descend into one of the most haunting corners of the Deadlands, and at the end waits Hatred's Soul. And this isn't just any bow. At level 19 plus, Hatred's Soul becomes the strongest bow in the game. It's lighter than the standard Daedric bow, but it deals more base damage and it comes with an enchantment that drains health and magic. At lower levels, it power scales down, but even then it holds its own. The level 15 to 18 version is still elite. Below that, it mirrors the state of a regular Daedric bow, except it's lighter and it's still enchanted. So not only is it fun to find, it's always worth finding, and you can actually get more than one. If you miss it, or if you enter the Coral Gate at a lower level, there's still hope. The Hatred's Soul world has a 1 in 7 chance of showing up when you enter a non-quest Oblivion Gate, and the Fort Sutch Gate has a 1 in 4 chance of dropping you there. That means if you know what to look for, you can farm multiple copies. I don't know why you would want multiple copies, but it's Oblivion and people tend to hoard weird stuff. These NPCs eat, they sleep, and they steal. They even fall in love or cheat on their spouses. And they do all of it whether you're watching or not. When Oblivion released in 2006, Bethesda promised something groundbreaking. A living, breathing world powered by something they called Radiant AI. This meant that there was no scripted events or static NPCs, but characters with wants, needs, and most importantly, schedules. Every character in Oblivion, from beggars to nobles, is driven by a hidden set of values. A responsibility score that determines whether they'll steal to survive. A schedule that tells them where to go and what to do and when, and needs like eating, sleeping, wandering, and even shopping. If someone's hungry and their responsibility score is too low, then they'll steal food. If a guard sees them, then a non-scripted event such as a fight could happen. Or, put simply, a consequence occurs. Some NPCs lead entire lives you're never meant to notice, like the skooma addicts we talked about who make a monthly pilgrimage to Breville, or affairs between married NPCs that you can uncover just by following the wrong person home at night.
It wasn't just Daedra and necromancers that stirred up chaos when Oblivion launched, since in 2006, the original Oblivion released with a T for teen rating. Players expected violence, mild language, and fantasy themes. What they didn't expect was an entire controversy that would drag Bethesda into the same kind of headlines usually reserved for Rockstar games. It started small with concerns over the game's graphic violence, which modders and hackers quickly discovered could be increased far beyond what the ESRB had seen. Decapitations, bloody dismemberment effects, and sprays of gore that were technically in the game's files but not shown in normal gameplay, all attributed to this decision. And this had a direct effect on my own life because I remember having it on my wish list in middle school and was pumped to get the game. But then it got rated M, and I had to convince my parents it wasn't just some American Pie type of game.
Stifler. Granny.
Buried in the game's code, modders uncovered new textures on character models, especially female ones. These textures weren't active by default, but they could be accessed through mods or console commands. And once they hit the internet, it sparked comparisons to this. Which, if you didn't know, is the hot coffee scandal in San Andreas where you bump uglies with another NPC. Under pressure from media watchdogs and government officials, the ESRB launched a full investigation. Their ruling showed that Bethesda had not disclosed the presence of hidden nudity and unapproved violent content during the ratings process, thus resulting in Oblivion's rating being revised from teen to mature. And retailers were being urged to relabel or even pull copies from shelves. Bethesda re-released patch versions, scrubbing out some of the content, but the rating held. What was supposed to be a prestige fantasy RPG suddenly became a symbol of the growing concern over modding hidden files and how transparent developers needed to be with regulators. Ironically, some of the content was never meant to be seen. But as any Elder Scrolls fan knows, if you give players access to the console and the construction set, they will find everything. Some players got it in the mail, others never knew it existed. But if you were lucky enough or obsessed enough to pick up the collector's edition of Oblivion, you were given more than just a coin in a fancy case. The Pocket Guide to the Empire 3rd Edition. This was a real physical book, bound in worn parchment, meant to feel like an artifact plucked straight out of Tamriel itself. Unlike most in-game lore texts, this one was written for you, the player, as if you were a citizen of the Empire. Its full name is technically this. Yeah, it's that kind of book. Set in the 3rd era 433, the exact year Oblivion takes place, the guide walks through everything from birth signs to detailed profiles of each province of Tamriel, along with brief and tantalizing glimpses into mysterious lands that we've never traversed before, and places we've still never truly seen in-game. What's especially fascinating is how this edition differs from its earlier counterpart, first printed with Redguard nearly a decade prior. That version? It's a pro-imperial propaganda piece. And the 3rd edition is much more measured. It reads like a reflection on a crumbling empire. An empire at the edge of an era. And that's exactly what it is. Oblivion marks the end of the 3rd era, or the last year of Uriel Septim's reign. These are the final days before the Oblivion crisis breaks the world apart. The guide's tone carries that weight, an almost melancholic awareness that this is the last time the Empire will be whole. So why is this buried in an iceberg? Because most players never read it. And fewer still realize how much it quietly reshaped lore going forward. Its descriptions of the provinces laid groundwork for Skyrim. Its hints regarding certain characters and other locations stirred fan theories for years. And for deep diving Elder Scrolls fans, it became more than just a collectible. It became a scripture. Before the Oblivion we knew, there was a version we never got. A version that looked better, sounded better, and felt like a real leap into the next generation of RPGs. But don't get me wrong, Oblivion still looked great and felt like a next-gen RPG at the time, but it was actually intended on being even better. In May of 2005, Bethesda Game Studios took the stage at E3 to showcase their upcoming RPG, The Elder Scrolls Oblivion. This was their shot at showing the world what a true next-gen open-world game could look like, and at the time, the Xbox 360 hadn't even launched yet. The footage was mind-blowing to say the very least. Ambient wildlife, rustling bushes, birds flying off at the sound of footsteps, and lighting that actually projected. Torches cast real shadows, and sunlight streamed through cracks and ruins like divine rays. The AI was also revolutionary. Bethesda called it Radiant AI, and it was supposed to give every NPC their own simulated life. The idea was that everyone had goals, desires, routines, and that they'd shop, eat, sleep, and even steal or murder if it fit their personality. This, however, was also a problem since NPCs would end up killing each other, so the AI was scaled appropriately by release. The physics engine built on the early Havoc system was incredible. Chains swung realistically, bones tumbled across the floor with real weight. Even the dynamic and multi-source lighting gave dungeons a haunting glow we'd never seen before in a Bethesda game. But nearly all of it was toned down for the final release. Why? Because Oblivion wasn't just being made for high-end PCs anymore. Bethesda had to hit the console market, specifically the Xbox 360. And this was a time when Xbox actually had insane exclusives, mind you. However, this meant optimizing for machines that couldn't handle all the bells and whistles and to make the game run on both low-end PCs and consoles. Features like the shadows were simplified, physics were minimized, and the once lush forest and AI sandbox was streamlined until they were manageable and safe. I want to re-emphasize that the game back in 2005 was already incredible for its time by the time it released. But I think it's also important to remember that there was an additional layer of greatness that never fully made it to production.
Back in the original Oblivion, if you trained your acrobatic skill high enough, which I think was like 50, you could unlock something that was pretty awesome. With the right timing, jumping away while blocking would cause your character to perform a full airborne flip backward. It wasn't just for show though, these flips could be used to dodge attacks mid-combat, especially in close quarters. And getting to a high acrobat skill didn't reward us with just backflips, but it also gave us combat rolls, which was like a sideways tumble when moving and jumping while blocking. It was part showmanship, but also goofy. which was very Bethesda of the devs to add. In the Oblivion Remaster, these moves are gone. There's no patch notes nor explanation that has been discussed as far as I can tell. They're just not there. Some think it's an animation oversight, and others think it's part of a broader combat simplification. They did add in a new dodge mechanic that is slightly useful. Blocking might still be more useful based on the staggering mechanics, but it's still pretty good. It is disappointing though that we'll never get to flip around again or do that sneak roll over and over again. At the very bottom of the Breville Wizard's Grotto, during the Arrow of Extrication questline, you might find your way to a flooded cavern. And if you dive deep enough, and I mean deep, this is sped up in like 3 times. Also, if you have thalassophobia, you might want to skip this one. Anyways, here you'll find the giant Slaughterfish. This thing is huge, easily bigger than a horse with jagged teeth, and it really wants to eat you. It was probably meant to serve as a boss or guardian, except Bethesda forgot one thing. The cave it's trapped in has a hole too small for it to swim through. The giant Slaughterfish is literally too thick to chase you, unless it figures out how to swim vertically, which is both hilarious and somehow even more terrifying. It just waits for you in the depths, watching you from the other side of the hole, occasionally wriggling like it's trying to force its way through. And if by some glitch or strange pathing behavior it ever does squeeze through the gap, pray to the 9. It's pretty damn tanky and it can do heavy damage. If you manage to defeat it, you'll find it's been hoarding loot for years. Bones, armor, tools, food, junk, just stuff. The kind of things you'd expect a giant fish to swallow over a lifetime of devouring like drowned bandits or other Cyrodiil scum. Consider it a mini-boss that a lot of players never got a chance to see. Oblivion is no stranger to bizarre encounters, but one of its rarest oddities is found in Mankar Cameron's paradise. Just a ways off from all the Kool-Aid drama and Daedric Gates, you'll find it. The ghostly mud crab. It's officially known as the spectral mud crab, and it's a translucent crustacean that appears only during the quest Paradise, and only if you explore before entering the Forbidden Grotto. It can be found on an island east of the main landmass in Paradise. Head to the water, hug the shore to the right, and keep going until you spot a larger island in the mist. If you swim across and ascend the Ayleid steps, you'll see the ghost for yourself. It's just guarding a chest and its presence is never explained. No dialogue or lore really. Just a ghost crab guarding a treasure in Paradise. Just some classic ghost crab shit.
If you spend any time at all wandering the beautifully chaotic world of Oblivion, or really any Bethesda RPG for that matter, you've probably encountered more than a few strange quirks. Glitches that have etched themselves into gaming legend, but perhaps none are quite as iconic or frankly bizarre as the infamous Paintbrush exploit. In Oblivion, paintbrushes aren't just ordinary items. They defy all logic, physics, and gravity, and due to an oversight in the game's coding, dropping a paintbrush will cause it to float, fixed in place wherever you leave it. Stack enough of these little brush bastards, and suddenly you have a floating brittle staircase, bridge, or platform to anywhere your imagination dares to take you. Want to scale a building in town for a better view? Just stack your paintbrushes and start climbing. Curious about what's hidden behind certain walls? Leverage a paintbrush to elevate you beyond Bethesda's boundaries. This glitch became legendary among players, celebrated not only for how absurdly effective it was, but also for its nonsensical nature. Some locations, and most locations in Oblivion, are meant to be explored. Others, they're more of a hidden behind the digital veil, never meant for mortal eyes type of thing. But if you've ever cracked open the developer console and typed in COC Testing Hall, you know exactly where we're going. Welcome to the Testing Hall, a mysterious floating realm high above Cyrodiil. This isn't a dungeon or a side quest. This is a developer's playground. An internal testing ground that somehow made its way to the final release. It can only be accessed via console commands, and once you're in, you're standing inside the digital guts of Oblivion. Here, the rules of immersion are tossed out the window. You'll find dozens of wooden doors, each a gateway to bizarre and fascinating warehouses. There's the armor warehouse, loaded with every single wearable piece of armor in the game. There's the weapon warehouse, where even cut weapons, removed from the final version, still sit in silent rows, and there's a clothing warehouse too, complete with the Emperor's robes. Yes, even Uriel Septim's based attire is stashed away here as lost luggage. Or maybe you want a copy of every book in Tamriel. Well, step into the book warehouse. And if you want to test your lockpicking skills in a hallway of gates, that's what the lockpick warehouse is for. You'll also find the AI testing zone, which is a weird place where NPCs pace back and forth in pre-programmed fashion routines like robotic actors. The Creature Grove houses nearly every creature in the game, including friendly goblins who may or may not want to harm you. And there's even a vampire warehouse where you can test out life as one of the soulless, complete with a snack to feed on. But the real prize is Hawkhaven. It's a full-on test town with guards, a merchant stacked with gold, enterable buildings, and even a ritual site for black soul gems. If you need to leave the surreal devscape, the Hawkhaven door lets you fast travel back to the real world. Otherwise, you're stuck in this strange limbo until you cock your way out. Oblivion may be a fantasy, but the testing hall? That's the dream behind the dream. Now here's a piece of Elder Scrolls history that even many die-hard fans never experienced firsthand. Before smartphones and before cloud saves, and long before mobile gaming was as crispy as it was, there was Oblivion Mobile, officially titled The Elder Scrolls Travels Oblivion. This version was released for Java-enabled cell phones back in the mid-2000s. This is not a fan remake. This was an official Bethesda product, part of the lesser-known Travel series, and it loosely followed the storyline of the main Oblivion game. But this was no open world epic. It was a tightly packed dungeon crawler featuring 10 main levels and 4 optional quests. You could pick from 8 different classes, each with unique access to weapons, spells, and armor. While primitive by modern standards, the game still delivered a surprisingly robust RPG experience for the hardware. Spells, loot, enemies, it was all there, crammed into a few hundred kilobytes of mobile memory. Sure, it wasn't flashy, it wasn't quite open world, and it didn't have Patrick Stewart voicing royalty, but it was Oblivion, on a phone, in your pocket, and if you had the right phone and enough patience to load the game through a clunky mobile internet service, it was a magical glimpse of Tamriel on the go. For a brief moment in gaming history, Cyrodiil once fit in the palm of your hand.
Every Oblivion fan remembers the first thrill of joining the Imperial City Arena, rising through the ranks, defeating enemy champions, and finally hearing the crowd chant your name as Grand Champion. But what if I told you that what we got was only a fraction of what was originally planned? The arena questline in Oblivion was meant to be much more. Originally, Bethesda intended for each major city in Cyrodiil to have its own arena, a full circuit of regional coliseums, each with its own local champion, unique matches, and rising difficulty. Only after conquering every city's arena would you earn the right to compete in the Imperial City, and that's where you'd become the true Grand Champion. The plan would have turned the arena into a full-fledged guild complete with storylines, local rivalries, and NPCs that each city would remember. But due to resource limitations, building all the arenas and populating them with voice actors, it was too much, and Bethesda had to scrap the idea. In some ways, it might have been a smart choice. Adding 8 more arenas could have made the questline repetitive or bogged down on weaker systems. But still, it would have been cool to see something like this in the remaster. Don't get me wrong, the remaster is already everything someone who grew up playing the original could dream for, but this is one edit I think they should have went for. We do get to see a bit of one of these arenas though. In Kvatch, you can find an arena there destroyed. It's pretty interesting. Not every criminal empire in Tamriel wears Daedric armor or wields enchanted staves. Some operate quietly, right under the noses of city guards, hidden in plain sight. Welcome to Shadenhall, home of the most low-key drug ring in Cyrodiil. Meet Dolfish Grohorum. By day, he's just an orc with a casual routine. A walk around the town square, lunch at Newland's Lodge, another stroll near the markets, a drink, a bite, and a night's rest. But behind that quilted doublet lies the head of a skooma operation. And this isn't just one orc gig. Dolfish's associates include Magub, Bazar, and the ever-friendly Borba, who runs the local general store. And then you have Augash, who in reality is the only one in this gang that actually does anything. And this is where we get most of the information on the gang. She shuttles both drugs and money between Shadenhall and the Kimona Tong. And yes, it's that same notorious Morrowind crime syndicate, and they have a pipeline right here in Cyrodiil. You can find them a little north of Shadenhall. You'll see her head there, make the deal, and then she brings some money back to Shadenhall, where Dolfish will collect it. But unless you were looking into the code for the game or following every NPC every minute of the day, it's unlikely you would ever notice this. And Shadenhall is just one piece of the puzzle. The true skooma pipeline starts down south and elsewhere. From there, it's smuggled into Cyrodiil, then distributed by Augash for Shadenhall's Orm gang, and nor and dear to Breville's infamous Skooma Den that we spoke about earlier. It all hints at something bigger. Maybe a war on drugs, or a chance to become a kingpin for yourself. We'll never know for sure, but the signs are everywhere. My guess is that this was meant to be a bigger questline at some point and it was abandoned. So many small details go into all of this, and it's kind of crazy.
I don't like thinking about zombies. Missing arms, legs, heads. They smell awful, and they're hard to kill.
Tucked away in the misty brush of Blackwood, nestled along the cobbly yellow road north of Leowin, you can find one of the most forgotten and least visited locations in all of Oblivion, Blankenmarch. There's no quest marker or storyline that sets it apart, or even dialogue for that matter. Yet this quiet little settlement is teeming with life. Not the loud, dramatic kind, but something quieter, stranger, and more unrefined. The village is home to only 3 men, Hans, Floyd, and Philip. You won't find any women or children here, just 3 quiet NPCs that, on the surface, are frozen in time as if the game loaded the village but forgot to write the rest of the script. And yet, Blankenmarch is rich in detail. There's a plot of crops outside Hans's home with everything from tobacco and tomatoes to leeks and strawberries. Tiger lilies bloom in clusters, a rune stone hums nearby, surrounded by rare bog beacon fungi. The town breathes with life yet has no purpose, and really, does it need a purpose? It seems happy to simply just be. Floyd Nathans even has a stash of skooma tucked inside a wooden chest, which is just another strange detail that feels like the beginning of a quest that never came to be. But I actually love the town for this exact reason. Finding items like this without a quest attached is really just a green flag to the dev's environmental building. Nearby, the Ruin Beyond is crawling with these specific trolls, which are unique creatures not seen elsewhere, and again hinting at a potential questline that was likely scrapped. All signs point to Blankenmarch once having a larger role or maybe even a side quest. Maybe something darker. In the final game, it's nothing more than a forgotten crossroad, but I'll say it again. It makes this place kind of cool to stumble upon. Blankenmarch is a mystery not because of what it contains, but because of what it doesn't.
Bye. Leave me alone.
Oblivion was everywhere in the late 2000s, and I mean everywhere. On PC, Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, and almost on the PSP. That's right, there was a full-fledged Elder Scrolls Travels Oblivion game planned specifically for Sony's handheld, and it got really fucking close to release. I threw the fuck word in because that's how close we were to getting this, you guys. Announced in November 2006 issue of the official PlayStation magazine, the PSP version was described as a very different experience. Think more focused and think less open world. It was intended to offer 10 large, concentrated levels with tight dungeon crawling gameplay. Think of it as the distilled essence of Oblivion, where no wandering fields occurred, but just raw action and exploration. The controls took inspiration from Metroid Prime, where left and right shoulder buttons controlled strafing and looking around, while the analog stick handled movement. 18 of the 21 original skills made the cut. On paper, it was shaping up to be quite an impressive mobile experience. It was even available for pre-order on GameStop and Amazon for $39.99, with other retailers selling it at closer to the $49.99 mark. Then nothing. Pre-orders were refunded in late 2007, and while the game briefly popped up again in early 2008 with the listed release date of June 30th, the game never launched and Bethesda never made an official statement. Bethesda essentially honeydicked us and then ghosted us. Then the honeydicking continued. In 2016, leaked footage and beta builds finally surfaced, proving the game was real and playable. But the footage was swiftly taken down by ZeniMax, then re-uploaded by the community. It remains one of the most mysterious cancellations in Elder Scrolls history, and I would argue in gaming history. There was no definitive cause and no closure, just rumors that Climax Studios ran into development trouble. I won't be too upset though. It honestly sounds like Oblivion Mobile.
There was a time when mortals could fly. Maybe not with wings or with dragons for that matter, but with sheer magical force. Spells that lifted bodies skyward, spiraling above towns, towers, and terrain. And then one day, it simply vanished without a trace. The Levitation Act passed in 3E 421 was an imperial law that quietly, yet forcefully restricted the use of levitation magic across the empire. Officially, it was a matter of public safety. But to the wizards of Morrowind, especially the reclusive Telvanni, it was seen as an insult, an imperial leash placed on the arcane elite, and like most things in Morrowind, it was ignored. In Oblivion, you'll notice levitation is missing entirely. replaced with more grounded and contained magical mechanics. And in Skyrim, even the boots of the Apostle, which was an artifact once known for its levitation, was scrapped from Creation Club content because, quote, it would break quests. So what does this tell us? Bethesda didn't just remove levitation because of lore, but they removed it because players broke the game with it. Bethesda games have always been nostalgic for the jankiness as is, but I could see dungeons being skipped entirely by floating over the walls or bypassing key story triggers and flying to a location that would crash a game. Levitation was too free for mages to use, too dangerous and too powerful for us mere mortals. So in both code and canon, Bethesda wrote it out and legislated it away. The Levitation Act became the perfect lore excuse to patch over a mechanical nightmare. But some still remember. Some still mod it back in.
This place was a city once, a beacon of art, music, and philosophy on the Gold Coast. Now it's a name and a few flat hills. Sutch is the city that vanished. If you've ever wandered north of Anvil, you may have stumbled upon a lonely ruin on an empty stretch of road known as Fort Sutch. Sutch was intended to be a full Colovian city in the Elder Scrolls Oblivion. It would have filled the massive gap between Anvil and Kvatch, anchoring the northern Gold Coast with its culture, markets, and Chapel of Kinnereth. Kinnereth, the goddess of air, wind, and the natural world, was meant to have a chapel here. But Sutch was cut late in development, likely due to time, budget, or performance constraints tied to cross-platform release. In its place is a flat, empty terrain still unusually barren compared to the lush hills and forests around it. A few ghost traces of Sutch remain in the final game. Fort Sutch sits on ground that looks like it was once meant to host a city. A few NPCs mention Sutch as if it still exists, and the absence of Chapel of Kinnereth across all of Cyrodiil is a direct result of Sutch being deleted. In the lore, Sutch is no minor town. It was once a thriving cultural hub, famous for its artists and musicians. The Skald King used to visit this place as a youth, and other characters wandered its markets during the Plane Meld. Even sea shanties from Sutch spread across Tamriel's coastal taverns. But tragedy struck in the Second Era 582, and a vampire clan attacked the city. Though the Terror himself was killed, Sutch's population was nearly wiped out. By the time of Oblivion, again in the Third Era, nothing remained but Fort Sutch, which is now an abandoned abbey crawling with mercenaries. One of them, a warlord named Roderick, was assassinated by the Dark Brotherhood under the guise of natural death. Even during the Oblivion Crisis, a gate to the Deadlands opened outside the walls. But Sutch never stood. And perhaps the strangest part is even as of Morrowind, Sutch was still marked on maps. How does a city vanish so thoroughly in just a few decades? Maybe Sutch was never meant to be remembered.
Oh no, what do we do? I'm so scared.
Here's a name that shouldn't be familiar. But if it is, you've probably been poking around places the Nine Divines never intended. Deep in the debug voids of Oblivion, specifically in a developer testing cell known only as Todd Test, lives a forgotten knight named Alban Corinis. He's not part of any quest, and he doesn't belong to any faction. He doesn't even technically exist in the normal game world, and yet Alban was front and center during Oblivion's earliest public reveal, the E3 demo. Dressed in shining Imperial armor and sometimes wielding a sword and shield, other times hefting a warhammer, Alban was a generic test dummy for showcasing combat mechanics and voice acting. I mean, what do you think? Does this dude look familiar? What makes him stand out isn't just that he was a tool for development, but it's that he speaks with the unmistakable voice of Todd Howard himself. The man, the myth, the meme lord, and the director of the game himself. Alban's barks and battle cries were voiced by Todd during development as possibly just placeholder lines, but they were never scrubbed out.
What? That really pisses me off.
This knight is basically a ghostly NPC version of Todd haunting the codebase. And technically speaking, there are actually 3 versions of him buried in the files, and you'll only ever meet him through console commands or modding. Some players joke that Alban is Oblivion's homunculus or a soul creation made solely to serve his master, a vessel for demonstration and nothing more. But you should take a listen to these lines. Todd isn't much of a voice actor in my opinion, at least when he first recorded these lines, but I can appreciate the rigidity and authenticity we get to hear.
And you can't miss him. He'll be the one outside, ranting at passers-by.
I'm sorry, I didn't know.
Oblivion Holidays was inspired by Daggerfall's holidays, where different towns would celebrate different holidays during different times of the year, which is similar to what we see in games like Fallout today. Going to these towns during their respective holidays would give you different perks or loot. Here, rather than me talk about it, listen to Pete Hines, who is the VP of Bethesda Softworks, talk about it.
And then the other one is something we did in Daggerfall, which is holidays. So different towns in the game will have different holidays at different times of year, and you can go there and get perk bonuses. You can get special artifacts. One of the towns will have Jester Day. So on Jester Day, you can go to town, and all the crimes in the town are 50% off. So you get caught doing a crime, and a guard comes to arrest you. You pay half as much as you normally would, because it's kind of everybody screwing around being a goof all day. So just different stuff like that you could do that adds to your existing game. Gives you some different experiences, whether it's new stuff to put on or new things to do.
There's a cave north of the Imperial City that doesn't have a name, and that's your first warning that something here is special or maybe even forgotten. Unmarked Cave sounds like a placeholder, but inside this 3-zone dungeon lies something far stranger than just a few monsters and dead-end tunnels. The final zone is called Black Queen's Hall, and tucked deep within is a lone chest, tagged in the construction set with this identifier. The chest is empty and unused, and it's all that remains of a quest that never made it into the game. Internally, it was listed as the M725, a miscellaneous quest that doesn't exist anywhere in the final build of Oblivion. There's no journal entry or trigger, but the rabbit hole goes deeper than this. In Shadenhall, there's a line of dialogue that players can hear from townsfolk. That's the only mention in the entire game of the Red Queen. She never appears, and there are no known quests referencing her. There's also no items tied to her. But combine that with the Black Queen's Hall, and suddenly you're staring into the shadows of a questline that Bethesda started but never finished. What was MS-25 supposed to be? Maybe it was a political intrigue between two rival queens. We don't know. And unless a developer speaks up or a dev build leaks, we may never know. Even reaching the Black Queen's Hall is nearly impossible without exploits. In the original Oblivion, you either needed to install the unofficial patch or glitch your way through to the dungeon in reverse using the legendary floating paintbrush cheat, or maxed out acrobatics. Even then, a locked door blocked the final section, forcing us to rely on console commands at that point. The Unmarked Cave is a dungeon built for a story that doesn't exist, with a mystery containing only 2 clues: a Black Queen and a Red Queen. This one is weird because it technically takes place during the Oblivion Crisis, but the information mostly comes from Morrowind and Skyrim. If you don't know who Jib is, let me give you a little breakdown. Before he was Saint Jib, he was a skooma-addicted assassin taking contracts to get by. His career ended when a hit on House Redoran officially went sideways. Another assassin for the Morag Tong tipped off the guards to save himself, and Jib got caught. After his trial, he was jailed, and then later transferred to the Imperial City's prison. In 3E427, he was sent back to Morrowind on a prison ship, sharing the ride with none other than the future Nerevarine. While they were freed in Seyda-Neen, Jiub was sent back to lockup. Trying to leave his violent past behind, Jiub dedicated himself to a single mission, wiping out the cliff racers that plagued Vardenfell. He spent years hunting them down from the back of a Silt Strider, eventually killing the last of them in a final battle out in the Ash Wastes. His efforts earned him sainthood, and he became a folk hero across Morrowind, even getting his own festival in Shadenhall. When you ask people about rumors going on during Oblivion, you might get the line, "Many are dead in the land of the Dunmer." Even Saint Jib, who drove the cliff racers from Vardenfell, has fallen to the Daedra hordes. This is true, but this didn't happen in Morrowind. By the time of the Oblivion Crisis in 3E433, Jib had moved to Kvatch and was working on a massive 26-volume autobiography. But when the Deadlands opened outside the city, Jib was killed and soul-trapped by a Dremora. His soul ended up in the Soul Cairn, where he wandered for centuries, not realizing he was dead. It wasn't until the last Dragonborn found him in 4E201 that Jib learned the truth. With the Dragonborn's help, he was able to recover the scattered pages of his memoir and share his story once more. Jib was one of the victims of the Kvatch attacks. People used to speculate that you could actually find his severed head in a house there. It used to look like this. It had a bluish hue, maybe pointing to his dark elf nature, with the ears cut off potentially. It's a stretch for sure, and you can find the same head asset multiple times throughout the original game. In the new one, it looks just like a zombie head, and it definitely has human ears. So I think we can rule out poor Jib's head.
We have a lot more to cover in our Fallout and Elder Scrolls Icebergs, so make sure you sub and stick around so you don't miss those. If there's something you'd like us to add to the next Icebergs, let us know in the comments. Remember guys, enjoyed time is never wasted time, and we'll see you in the next.